Good morning, everyone. It's nice to see you again. I have a reading for you today before I start my sermon. This reading is from Desert Father Dorotheus of Gaza, who lived, taught, and prayed without ceasing, as they did, in the 6th century of the current era. He was a great teacher and the abbot in a monastery where he lived in community with other monks who wanted to focus on prayer and contemplation outside of the rumble of the secular world. He said, imagine that the world is a circle, that God is the center, and the radii are the different ways human beings live. When those who wish to come closer to God walk towards the center of the circle, they come closer to one another at the same time as to God. The closer they are to God, the closer they come to one another. And the closer they come to one another, the closer they come to God. I don't know if there is a slide, but it's, yeah. Thank you. A couple of weeks ago, someone left an invitation to a neighborhood meeting rolled up in the handle of my front door. The invitation said, please try to attend a meeting at the Baptist Church next Friday to discuss a proposal for an overnight warming location to serve our unhoused neighbors. Overnight warming location, for those of you who are wondering, are pop-up shelters, not a permanent shelter. They pop up overnight when the temperature goes below 20 Fahrenheit. It depends on the location, but like when it's dangerously cold to stay outside at night. They aren't activated any more than 18 to 20 times per year because it doesn't get that cold very often, but they're something. And I was delighted to see that there was an effort in my community to bring one of these centers into town, because I know they exist in St. Louis and Alton, which are neighboring areas, but still, if you're unhoused in Edwardsville, it's kind of far to go when it's that cold. I had been hoping the community would start one. I even signed petitions to that effect last year. So I was happy there would be a meeting, and in my mind, I was full of optimism. I thought it would be a celebration, and yay, rejoicing that we were taking care of one another, we were taking care of the most vulnerable. Because, make no mistake, these people, our neighbors, the unhoused, are in Edwardsville, whether there's a warming center or not. So I went and immediately signed up for volunteering, and now I'm a shift lead for the next time they activate. And because the center is literally across the street from my house in the Baptist church, so I'm super excited. I sat down to listen to the team of speakers, which is a coalition of several church leaders from around town, and it's a multi-denominational project which shows how we can cross boundaries of belief for the common good. And this is a way of defining pluralism, which is the theme of the month here. Many religious viewpoints united for the common good, regardless of the specifics, right? So as I listened, I was surprised that the tone of the speakers was almost apologetic. It's like they're apologizing. They were trying to justify the warming center's upcoming existence. I mean, frankly, as time moved on, I was getting a little annoyed. I'm like, why are they apologizing? This is a good thing. There's no need to explain why this is a good thing, right? Can we just move on to like celebration implementation? Well, no, because it turns out that the organizers of the meeting had reason to lean into their long justifications. Towards the end of the meeting, there was a Q&A time, and there were a few voices opposing this implementation of the center, much to my surprise. Not in my backyard, they said. Specifically, there was a man who painted a dim picture of what would happen if we let those people in our neighborhood, those people. He spoke of knowing those people. They don't want to change. They are gross and unwashed. By the way, the center offered showers. And how those people can approach our children when they go to school, because the church is near a middle school. In his view, our community is not the same community in which those people live, except it is. And with his word and his petition, because yeah, guys, he had a petition, he essentially condemned the unhoused in our community to suffer of exposure. If it goes his way, no center. And by the way, exposure already happened. Last year, one of the unhoused residents lost both of his feet to frostbite. The angry dude technically was not alone. There were some who agreed with him. As he was speaking, I had a weird reaction apart from what's he talking about. I also felt sorry for him. Yeah, because I saw, as he was speaking, an element of isolation, his isolation. Even though there were others who agreed with him, that was no community. All I could think was, nobody's free until we're all free, right? And he wasn't free because he was trapped by fear and hatred. Fear, anger, hate, all these strong negative emotions disconnect us from each other and from ourselves. And not the first time I felt this way lately. So the movie Amadeus is one of my favorite movies. I remember seeing it in theaters back when it first came out in 1984. I just realized it's for almost 40 years ago. That doesn't make me feel much better. I have a VHS copy, which for the younger among you was a way we watched movies in the way back. I also have the DVD. It's available on Prime right now. And in my household, we quote from Amadeus like some people quote from Scripture or from Star Wars. And the story, for those of you who haven't seen it, is a fictional account of the rivalry between Mozart, who was a freelance musician and composer in Vienna, and Antonio Salieri, the imperial court composer at the court of Joseph II, also in Vienna. These people really existed, but the story is a bit of a myth. It's founded on a legend around this rivalry that Salieri was so envious of Mozart that he planned his untimely demise, because Mozart died when he was 33 years old, which was a little premature. It didn't happen like that, but it's fun to pretend. Milos Forman's brilliant movie adaptation of Peter Shaffer's play, Amadeus, shows one way that might have happened. The narrator of the action is an old Salieri, wrecked by remorse, confessing his sin to a young priest. F. Murray Abraham won the Oscar for his performance as Antonio Salieri in the movie, in case you... Anyway, yeah, I love that movie. What can I say? It takes me a minute to get back into it. Mozart's silly laugh. The photography is beautiful. I appreciate the attention to detail of the period costuming, the atmosphere, the wigs. And of course, there is the beautiful music, the deep cuts in Mozart's catalog, played by the Orchestra of St. Martin in the Fields beautifully with period instruments. And yeah, there is some of Salieri's music too. What kept me coming back over the years used to be the story arc of Mozart as the genius underdog and the nefarious scheming of Salieri, which ultimately folds under the brilliance and the, eternal quality of Mozart's music. And so, yeah, I said used to because last time I watched, something else happened to me, something that hadn't happened to me before. You see, at the turning point of the movie, when it becomes from light and fun entertainment, it becomes a dark indictment of Salieri's character, is this scene that Salieri has where he realizes Mozart's talent is God-given, and so he realizes he'll never be a musical genius. He will be just a musical, okay musician. And so instead of rejoicing that he's alive at the same time as this genius, he gets mad at God. And he curses God and vows vengeance against God, which is, difficult. Because God has put the talent into this little man, he says, who is not devout as he was. And at this point, every time before I watched that movie, I felt smug. I'm like, yeah, we all know how it ends, right? Because who can name a piece by Salieri in this room? It never happens, right? Like, good, yeah. It's easy to go directly to an interpretation of the moral failings of Salieri and feel superior and smug. To relate more to Mozart, yeah, we wish, and to side, though, with the underdog. And yet, last time I watched, I was struck by something different. Something beyond the smugness and the whole thing I just said. I saw something so fundamentally human that it took me aback. I noticed that Salieri is angry because he's alone. Like that man at the neighborhood meeting, his rage disconnects him and makes him angrier. I felt sorry for Salieri too, just like I had for that man at the meeting. Salieri's theological outburst has him lashing out at God upon the recognition that he's condemned on the outside of something he wants, on the outside of those concentric circles. He is grasping for something, but all he can come up with is anger, which disconnects him from the rest of the people in his life until he has no people in his life. And so he tells this story to the young priest, because at the end of his life, he has no friends, just employees. And look, being Mozart in that movie is no great shakes, apart from being a musical genius, of course. He is tortured by his enemy. He is humiliated by the aristocracy of Vienna. He is sick, and yet he isn't alone. We see him with his family reaching out, making friends, trying hard to stay in community. He goes out playing. And yeah, his choices may be questionable, like he drinks a whole lot, but he sure shows a desire for connection. And maybe this time I saw something different because I've been thinking a lot about what disconnects us. I felt sad for Salieri much in the same way I felt sad for the guy at the meeting, because I see their suffering. Yeah, because they are suffering. If I were a Christian, which I'm not, I would say that that is because they were in the grips of one of the 7 deadly sins. I don't know, envy, wrath, or is there a deadly sin for too much middle class anxiety? Maybe. greed, I don't know. Anyway, they are suffering because they put themselves on the outside, whether they realize it or not. And clearly they don't realize it. This is a special type of suffering, y'all. It is a unique type of poison that you feed yourself. Fear and anger go together like peanut butter and chocolate. In fact, fear turns into anger, and if and when it's left unattended, it can turn into hate. It's easy to cocoon away from the situation, to refuse to look or deal with the reality of the predicament. And for Salieri, it was Mozart's talent for the dude in the meeting is refusal to see that those in need are his neighbors. In UU terms, we would say these feelings make both of them reject the responsibility of our covenant with each other. The responsibility of our covenant with each other. And with God, if you're thus inclined, but you don't need to invoke a higher power in this case, because disconnection is not a metaphysical phenomenon. It is a human predicament. Dorotheus of Gaza brings this point home. His words almost make you feel the warmth and the light of community. The light of divine love in terms of connection. I think about this passage frequently. And when I think of human connection and compassion, I always remember the visual that you saw in the slide, that the closer we get to the light of God, the closer we are to each other. And I know that not everyone in this room and not all of us believe in a God that connects us all, but by being within and outside of us. But listen, the concentric circles work well even in the absence of a divine principle or the belief in a divine principle, because connection is the point. When we imagine descending along these concentric circles, when we imagine ourselves as tiny dots in these lines connecting the concentric circles in which we are moving, we see an interconnected web centered in love. When we are angry and lonely, or when we feel empty, we are on the outskirts of these concentric circles, away from our fellow humans, whether we put ourselves away or something else, keeping away from the interconnected web. And nothing good can happen when we stay outside of these circles, because there is no community on the outskirts. There is no common good. No mutual anything. It's cold out there without the warmth of love and the embrace of community. We are just a lonely, tiny dot in a large outer concentric circle, drinking the poison of loneliness, anger, fear, hate, and believing it will kill our enemy. Like in the movie, or in my neighborhood meeting. You know, an earlier version of this sermon was entitled Healing Salieri, because I felt he could have used the help. Yet, really the only true healing from any strong negative emotion like anger or fear comes from a sense of connection and from the warmth of community. Because we are human beings, we are gregarious, and we were never meant to exist alone. Connections go both ways. We reach out and people reach out to us. And when we are connected, we're able to offer and receive help. And that is how we can heal anger, fear, and we can make community. By moving closer to one another, we can change retaliation into reconciliation. And connection is not simply physical, right? You can make a phone call, you can text someone, you can tell them, I'm here. Pluralism, the theme of the month, is not simply the tolerance of one another's religious beliefs, although it is also that. Pluralism at its essence is the realization that we are, as the Reverend Dr. King wrote in his letter from Birmingham jail, quote, tied together in a single garment of destiny, unquote. I mean, this is a beautiful passage in a great letter that he wrote while he was in jail in response to a group, a plurality, if you will, of clergy of various denominations who had opposed him, strongly opposed him because of his justice work. To me, this passage represents a model of pluralism, because he wrote it to his fellow clergy who disagreed with him, and yet he still wanted to engage them, to model the connection of community and to show why he worked for justice. He knew what he was up against, and still he chose connection. He wrote, quote, in a real sense, that's the longer quote, all life is interrelated. All men are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. I can never be what I ought to be until you are what you ought to be. And you can never be what you ought to be until I am what I ought to be. And then he says, this is the interrelated structure of reality. The interrelated structure of reality. Does that sound familiar to any of you? In the great interconnected web of existence, love reaches out. This is what our seventh principle is all about, and this is what we covenant with one another. I know that this congregation, too, is a place where people can ask for help and receive help. And even if you do it imperfectly, these imperfections are the part of being connected. Your network looks like love. So pluralism is living in community with the understanding that we may be different. We may worship differently, but we are all human, and we all have the capacity to reach out and love and be loved. So may you reach out to love, and may love reach out to you. Amen, and blessed be.